From the WKYT studios in Lexington, this is Kentucky Newsmakers with Bill Bryant.
Good morning from WKYT News. Hope you're having a nice weekend. Today we'll have a visit with a couple of the young guns or next generation of Kentucky lawmakers. We had this program scheduled when we learned of the death of Kentucky political legend Wendell Ford, the governor who became a long-serving U.S. Senator. We'll proceed with our interviews with Republican State Senator Max Wise, an FBI analyst who returned to his native Campbellsville to teach government and to be elected to office, and with Democratic State Representative James Kay, who was just 16 years old when Wendell Ford ended his more than 30 years in public office. But first, when they called me about Ford's death this week, I remembered a piece that I had done almost 20 years ago, back in 1995, where we talked with Ford about his career. We've had some snips of that on our news this week, but here's the piece as it aired in 1995 when Ford was still in his prime at 70 years old.
I don't know what the ingredient is, but I love this state. I love the people, and I try my best to make things work.
Longer than most Kentuckians can remember, Wendell Ford has been in public office. After a term as lieutenant governor, he won the governorship in 1971. In those days, the governor set the legislature's agenda, told them what to pass, and waited to sign it.
When something happened in the governor's office and you made a decision, a little later you go outside and put your hand on it. Now in Washington, it's awful hard. It takes several years to get things through, and then when it happens, why, people forget how it started.
Governor Ford took the sales tax off food, consolidated several state agencies, and expanded the state merit system. He also vetoed a bill that would have allowed collective bargaining for teachers. Ford liked being governor. He could see his ideas in action.
Well, you could do things, and you could see people being helped. You know, you get fussed at, and they fume with you, and you have to learn to be hated in politics, because people don't like you because you didn't make the right kind of decision or their apparent right decision. And but after the program or project is finished and you see that it's helped people, then that wipes out all of the frustrations you had getting there.
3 years into his term and unable to run again, Ford ran for the U.S. Senate, defeating Republican Marlow Cook. He's been there ever since, rising to the position of Senate Majority Whip, walking with America's leaders.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
In Frankfort and in Washington, his political positions have been both liberal and conservative.
I hope I'm in the middle. I don't want to be branded as a ultra-liberal or liberal or ultra-conservative. I want to vote basically on the issue.
The 70-year-old former governor hasn't closed the door on running for re-election to the U.S. Senate in 1998, but he knows his long political career is approaching its sunset, and he knows how he wants it remembered.
If I played a small part in making Kentucky a better place to live and raise your children, then I've made a contribution. If the things I've done in Washington will help this state and its people, then I feel like I've made my contribution, and I hope the people will see me as that.
Well, as we know, Senator Ford decided not to run in 1998 and enjoyed several years of retirement before his death this week. And now to our discussion with two young lawmakers, one of the youngest members of the Kentucky General Assembly, Democratic State Representative James Kay from Woodford County. He also serves parts of Fayette and Franklin counties. Kay won a spirited special election in June of 2013. Kay's co-chair of the Education Accountability Committee, serves on several other committees as well. Democrats held on to their advantage in the State House in November in an election that otherwise roared Republican in Kentucky and elsewhere. We're going to talk with him about the issues facing Kentucky, but I also want to ask him something about Wendell Ford. Representative Kay, welcome. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
We said you were very young when Wendell Ford left office, and yet you became aware as you got interested in public service of his service to the state.
Absolutely. Wendell Ford was a political giant in Kentucky. You know, he was known for many things, but I think one of the things that I was impressed with as a student of politics and having the opportunity to meet him was his humility and his modesty and the application of common sense to public policy. And I had the opportunity to meet with Wendell Ford in Owensboro during the special election, and he gave me advice and his support, which I will always cherish and always remember.
What do you think when you hear, for instance, in that piece, him talking about being practical, about not getting too far out on one side or the other?
I think as a politician, somebody who's coming up in politics in Kentucky, it's important to look at Wendell Ford and realize that over the many accomplishments he had over his entire life, he looks at the ability to affect change, positive change in the lives of Kentucky families as his hallmark of success. And that's something that I hope to do, and probably many politicians and lawmakers across the aisle and across Kentucky should hope to do.
Just before your election, you had that opportunity to go down and meet with him and talk with him. What did he tell you about public service?
Well, one of the things, I had just been nominated to run, and I was finding my way and trying to figure out who I was. And he told me from the very beginning, he said, you have to be yourself. You have to be yourself and be true to your community and the people that support you and love you, and that's what I've tried to do.
Well, now that you're there representing Woodford and parts of Fayette and Franklin counties as a state representative, heading into a short session here with a few weeks to try to get a lot of things done. And Representative Kay, there are a lot of problems facing Kentucky right now. What has momentum to get past, do you think?
Well, I think that the #1 issue, particularly in central Kentucky, and you see it all over Kentucky, affecting our communities on a family-by-family level, is the heroin addiction and the heroin crisis. I've had the opportunity to meet with many families who've lost their loved ones, classmates of mine from school and people I know in our community. You know, we have a small, tight-knit community, and when something as powerful as heroin gets into our community and takes the lives of you know, some of the people who are friends and family and loved ones of our community, it's something that is deeply, deeply disturbing, and something that the legislature can take action and do. You know, as they did with clamping down on prescription pills in the past, the heroin legislation needs to move through this time. It needs to have a bipartisan effort, and I think that a failure to pass this time would be a failure on the leadership of both the House and Senate.
Were you frustrated that it didn't pass last year when, you know, now, since then, we apparently have tripled the number of overdose deaths in Kentucky since there was an effort to pass it last year, but it didn't go anywhere?
That was a huge frustration in my first session in the General Assembly, to see something that was such a clear and obvious problem that could be addressed, to see it fail in the waning hours of the session was disappointing, frustrating, and I hope a lesson learned by all 138 members.
Do you favor getting into the budget in a non-budget year to deal with some issues that some lawmakers say are so pressing that they should be addressed? For instance, the state retirement pensions and the Cancer Research Center at UK, among the things mentioned.
You know, I come at it from a fresh approach that any problem that we face in Kentucky, we need to try to address the problem and fix it if it's possible to do so from a legislative perspective. So I think, you know, using common sense, and if we have a problem that affects our budget that we need to take care of in a non-budget year, then we need to do that. I think particularly in the long term of Kentucky's financial future, that the pension issue is a growing problem that affects all Kentuckians. As many Kentuckians know, it's our debt as Kentuckians. And from a fiscal standpoint and from a conservative standpoint, we need to address that debt and find ways to solve that problem so we uphold our obligation to state employees.
A lot of state employees look at it as deferred compensation, that they were offered the jobs back excuse me, 30 or 40 years ago, so that on the premise that they would get this money in retirement, right?
That's exactly right, and it's also an inviolable contract, a contract that can't be broken to our state employees and to our teachers. So not only is it a promise that we've made, but it's a legal obligation, which we as Kentuckians, you know, share the burden of.
Do you see a statewide, excuse me, do you see a statewide smoking ban passing this year?
I see more and more growing momentum to pass a statewide smoking ban. I certainly support that issue. You know, when you look at the death of Wendell Ford, who was a strong supporter of Kentucky tobacco throughout his whole career, and he passed away of lung cancer. I think that, you see many issues in Kentucky, but I think one of the health issues that is important and urgent to address is the issue of smoking. And I think the statewide smoking ban is growing in momentum and has an opportunity to pass this session.
Being 32 years old and new to Frankfort and in the legislature, do you think you approach things differently than maybe older lawmakers do?
Well, I certainly hope that I bring new, fresh ideas and fresh energy. You know, I've grown up in a little bit different time than some of the elder statesmen with the advent of Facebook and social media and modern technology. I think it's something that my generation looks at as a tool to try to help improve our communities, help reach out and make connections to people that would have not been available in past generations. And I think it's also, you know, I've seen as a student of politics and someone who's been interested since I was a young man, I've seen a lot of issues that seem like they have simple solutions always get caught up in the politics. And so one of the things that I think I bring to the table is an issue to look past partisan politics and try to look at the issues really facing Kentuckians.
Are you concerned at how little people out there, maybe everyday citizens, pay attention to their government or know exactly what is going on in Frankfort?
Well, and I think that with social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, those type of things, people hear about it and pay attention to it more so than maybe ever before. And I think that it's my responsibility as a state representative, and I think it's our elected officials' responsibility to engage our communities first and then the broader Commonwealth to try to get people involved and take notice of issues that are affecting them in our state.
Do you engage in that way with social media?
I absolutely do. I try to take an intentional effort to do that.
I know the filing deadline's coming up Tuesday, and so we don't know exactly who the candidates may all be, but do you support a particular candidate for governor at this point? Well,
I'm waiting till the filing deadline, but I can say that, you know, I have a lot of respect for Jack Conway and the things that he's done as an elected official and as our Attorney General, and I have a huge respect for my colleague Sandy Overly in the House. She's been a mentor to me, and I think that she's made a positive impact on leadership in the House and leadership in the General Assembly.
Representative James Kay, who's a Democrat from Woodford County, appreciate you being here very much. And we'll be back in just a moment, and we'll hear from Republican State Senator Max Wise, another young lawmaker in Frankfort, coming up on WKYT. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT. Republicans hold a powerful majority in the state Senate right now and will have few problems advancing their agenda there. But with Democrats in control of the state House, the two sides either have to work together or cancel each other out as to what we'll see, and maybe it'll be some of both. Republican Senator Max Wise is joining us today. He's a former intelligence analyst for the FBI, now a professor at Campbellsville University. He also teaches at the UK Patterson School of Diplomacy. Senator Wise can touch on a range of topics, and we're glad to have him with us today on Kentucky Newsmakers. Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Bill, for the invitation.
You're in Lexington, by the way, to talk about your proposal to create a research fund for pediatric cancer, and that would be a checkoff on people's income tax box. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Tell us about it.
It's a way to direct, funds of when we fill out state income tax, where we can designate any money that we wish to go towards, funds, so forth. And the one we're looking at is for pediatric cancer specifically. There's just a lack of funding that we're looking at the state level. Less than 4% of money going towards children's pediatric cancer awareness and for research. And, we've got to do a better job with that. I'm very personal with the situation of being a father of a childhood cancer survivor who was diagnosed at 6 months of age and who now is 8 years old. And we've got a good story, but there's so many families out there that do not have the success stories that we have and could be also, down the path, something like this approaching them as well as families, and just needing to make sure that our research dollars are going towards, pediatric cancer.
So this proposal is that if there's to be a refund on the state income tax, that people could check that, it would go into this fund, and then that fund would go where?
It's going to go towards a research fund that's going to be created. It's going to have an advisory board made up of our regional hospitals. It's going to have some direction on where the money's going to be displaced. It's also going to have some parents of childhood cancer survivors that will be on the advisory board as well, and these all will be appointed by the governor. And so once again, it's bringing collaboration as well of all of our regional hospitals that are working on childhood cancer research right now, and be able to see the best place that this money needs to be going towards.
On the question of cancer and research, do you support getting into the budget in a non-budget year to deal with the proposed research facility at the University of Kentucky, as apparently President Stivers wants to do?
You know, I think anytime we talk about opening up the budget in a non-budget year, I think it can be somewhat of a difficult situation and kind of can be a slippery slope there. But I think with this bill, I think it just shows once again priorities for Kentucky. We're talking about a healthy Kentucky, and we're talking about you know, a situation that cancer affects so many people. I mean, I've got my calls today talking about pediatric children's cancer, but we could be sitting here with a number of guests talking about all the different types of cancer, how much it affects our state. So I think President Stivers is very close to this situation, and I think it is a priority that we do need to address. I think we definitely need to look at.
Now, would you be getting into, before getting into the budget in a non-budget year, to shore up the state retirement, as some are also pushing for?
You know, once again, I think we need to look at as legislators, you know, right now, you know, priority issues, and I think as leadership, and I think President Stivers, you know, is one of those that definitely wants to make those discussions aware. And, you know, if we're looking at, you know, cancer research, if we're looking at retirement, I think that's where we're going to have to sit down and say, you know, what are the priorities, you know, right now for the state that we need to be addressing.
What are your other priorities for this session?
You know, right now, when I've been up there, the best thing for me to do is just like that college freshman, to kind of take it all in. You know, really look at the landscape. And legislation is a process of seeing the rules, the orders of how things look to go. Education, being a college professor, is very passionate to my heart. One of the bills that I'm looking to file when we go back in February is going to deal with dual credit for high school juniors and seniors being able to use the KEYS money, which I've seen wonderful things right now as a college professor for families that need that extra financial assistance to dip into that. Well, this is a way for high school juniors and seniors to take up to 6 hours of college credit, or also for technical skills, those who want to do this for vocational towards a certificate program, that they can dip into that money, which can help a lot of hardworking families right now at that level to be able to go ahead and get some of this college credit, and that also saves them to not have to stay 4+ years in college.
What bills do you think have momentum going toward the start of this session right now? Do you, for instance, heroin bill did not pass last session, and there was a lot of frustration as to why it didn't, and a lot of reasons as to why it didn't. But do you think that the sides can come together and move a heroin bill?
I think that's great that you brought that up, and I think it showed, especially on the Senate side, we were able to get right to work that first week and get some good legislation passed through to be able to pass over to the House, number one being the heroin bill. I think it was a great job by Senator Chris McDaniel, the sponsor for that bill, to show the bipartisan effort to get that passed through the Senate as quickly as we did. I've got a 30-year-old brother-in-law that passed away this fall from heroin. It was an overdose in Nashville, Tennessee. And I think it just goes to show that heroin and drug addiction problems can affect every family in the Commonwealth. It doesn't matter if you're high income, middle income, lower income, black, white, it doesn't matter. It's a problem. And I know that our leadership was very disappointed last year when we did not able to come to an agreement with both chambers. And I think this time it is going to get passed through because it gives law enforcement the tools. It also has good treatment and also has good recovery with that.
What are Kentuckians to make of looking at it when the Senate comes with a bill that they know the House is not going to pass, like the right to work legislation, or the House comes with the minimum wage hike or something that is their priority, they know the Senate is not going to pass. Isn't that what frustrates people out in Kentucky?
It is, and I tell you what most people say, what I hear my constituents is, but you do so much of a better job than what's in Washington, D.C. in the Congress level, though. At least we're able to work and have some type of compromise. The right to work legislation. On the Senate side, we had a very good discussion on that our first week up in Frankfort. Democrats, Republicans, we're going to agree and disagree on a lot of issues, but there was no, volatile backstabbing, anything like that. We had a good discussion. And I'm sure when it goes to the House, Speaker Stumbo has already said the buzzards are going to be circling the House and that bill's not going to get off and it's not going to pass. But I think what we've got to do on issues in Kentucky is, if we're not passing it there, look at the local level. We've got a lot of counties passing right to work. And if it's not working in Frankfort, that's where local government steps up, and which we're seeing in Warren County and the others.
Now, you're a professor of government. Do you think that is a good way to go for more local decisions to be made on some issues like this? And if so, understanding that it may be some things that you might disagree with.
Exactly. You know, I think sometimes the best government is the one that can be solved first at the local level. It's almost like there's a chain of command. When I worked in the FBI, it was, you know, start here and go your way up. And I think there is some good decision making, because local, you know, school boards, local communities know what's best for their communities. Sometimes we don't need so much government regulation in Frankfort or Washington, D.C. telling local people what they can and cannot do in their community. So, you know, I'm all for a proponent of when local option can be decisions.
The governor calls for passage of a statewide indoor smoking ban. That has been local option so far. It got through the House last year and did not get through the Senate. Do you think that now has momentum?
I think there's momentum. I think, you know, the governor addressed this, the Kentucky Chamber banquet the other night. You know, once again, I come from a community where we passed it on a local level, and right now that's what the smoking ban is. It isn't a local option. If communities want to pass it, they have the right to do so. I've got a wife who's a pediatric dentist, so I hear quite often about, you know, the health care needs and awareness that we need to be promoting for a strong and healthy Kentucky. So I do think there's some momentum that's brewing, especially on the House side of the bill.
Would you vote for it if it came to you?
You know, I've always said that it is a local option. Right now, I think it is best served for the constituents in a town to make the decision for themselves.
So it sounds like the Senate is probably not going to go for the smoking ban. From what we understand, when we hear the Republicans taking the position that it's a local decision.
Right. I'm not here to speak on what's on behalf of the majority of the leadership on that, but I do think, you know, the kind of the Republican mantra has been on this is allow locals to make the decision for themselves.
You've said you favor putting the question of casino gambling on the ballot for voters to decide. That does not look to be anything that's going to come up this time around, but you think that it's time to make that decision?
Well, I said that during my campaign, and I think it is. It's, you know, I hate to say the cliche, we're beating a dead horse here when we're talking about horse racing, but I think that it's something that there's no momentum. There's nothing that's moving forward on that, but, you know, it is something, if we're going to keep discussing and discussing, allow the people the right to make the decision, but I don't see it's going to have any legs this time.
You mentioned that there's an art to legislation and what goes on in Frankfort and kind of working through. Both sides will come with proposals and you try to work something out. Are you concerned, though, that people out there are not taught enough civics, don't understand enough about how their government works, and that we have a little bit of a crisis in that regard? And again, you know, given to your background as a government professor.
You know, I do. I see it so much, and you know, the first day of my classes for an American government or an intro to political science class that I teach, I pass out a 25-question U.S. citizenship test. It's taking straight from questions on the citizenship test that we give for those that want to become legalized. And they're basic questions, Bill, and I get so many students that cannot get half of those 25 correct. And we've got a problem with that. And so many, when I ask them, when I give the test results back, what's the problem here? So many just are not informed. They feel like they had a class on Kentucky government back in 8th grade or U.S. government back in 5th grade. And at the high school level, it's more science and math, and we're losing some of the civics portion of things, which is so important because government affects our daily lives in so many aspects.
Do you, as you notice that there is, and you said less partisanship maybe in Frankfort than there is in Washington, however, there's plenty of it. And does it frustrate you at times that people say they can't be for something that they know is the right thing to do because they think their political party might be in the way?
You know, I think that sometimes can happen, or if it's also, I can't be for that because I may not lose my re-election. You know, if my constituents back home may not allow me to vote for that, but it's in their conscience as they think that may be the best for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I'm under the age of 40, and I think I'm very optimistic, and I'm probably stepping into this Senate role as a very, you know, eager freshman that has a lot of energy in the legislature, and I think I look at the glass half full of what can we do to better our Commonwealth? What can I do to better my district? And what can I do as a legislator to be the best at what I'm doing up there?
I want to take full advantage of your range of expertise before I let you go. In your capacity as a former FBI intelligence analyst who teaches at the Patterson School, how dangerous of a world are we in right now? Do we have concerns that we really ought to be paying more attention to in this country?
Well, you know, when we captured and killed Osama bin Laden, you know, I said to my classes then, that doesn't just end the war on terrorism. You know, we can't have celebrations in the street just because we kill one man, because Al-Qaeda has spawned into such a regional force, and now it's the offshoots of the ISIS groups and the different ones of Nigeria, the Boko Haram, and it is a worldwide presence of what we're seeing. I do worry about it. You know, I worry about the spread of this, especially on the internet today, how we can radicalize people and how people can, you know, take up arms over the internet and become what we call armchair jihadists. It is a very scary time. I think we look at the Boston bombing attacks that have happened, how easy it is on events like that. You know, we're going to see the lone wolf attacks like we saw in France, of where easily somebody could strap on a bomb, go in with a AK-47 and do destruction like that, especially hitting soft targets. You know, the hard targets I don't worry so much about because we've got a strong security presence. But the soft targets, the easy places to go into, that's scary.
It's campaign year in Kentucky for those statewide elections. You have a candidate for governor?
I'm supporting Jamie Comer. I've supported Jamie Comer very much throughout this race. In my district especially, Commissioner Comer was a state representative down in the southern portion of my 16th district. I know the work he's done. I know the work he can do as the next governor of Kentucky. And I think he's a guy that has a very strong vision. No one's going to outwork him on the campaign trail, and I'm very excited to support him.
Senator Max Wise, Republican of Campbellsville, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Bill.
Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
We're back on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers in just a moment. We do want to thank you for joining us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers. Remember that filing deadline is coming up on Tuesday, and so we will see exactly who's in the races coming up this year. Of course, Senator Wendell Ford lies in state at the state capitol throughout the day today, and we'll be covering that on WKYT News as well. Our scheduled guest next week on Kentucky Newsmakers is the governor of the Commonwealth, Steve Beshear. Thank you for joining us again. We hope you're along bright and early on WKYT this morning. We start at 4:30 and have a good week ahead.